I had a fire chief come up to me after a county chiefs meeting, a fire chief that I've known for decades, and tell me, "Hey, I just want to say thank you for the resources that MnFIRE is providing." And I'm like, "No problem, chief. We're happy to do it, and I hope your firefighters, on the mend is on the road to recovery." And he said, "Well, it wasn't one of my firefighters; it was me." And this person is right out of Central Casting, mountain big, hands the size of pie plates, big tough person. And he said, "I didn't think I was ever going to be able to smile again." And then one night at 11 o'clock at night, I decided to call your toll-free number because I was going to a dark place. And he said, "And since then, my life has changed, and it saved my marriage, and it saved me. And it's just it's an awakening." And his life has been forever changed.
Stay tuned. Coming up is my interview with George Esbensen, president of the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, or MnFIRE for short, as we talk about the Hometown Heroes Assistance Program. Hello and welcome to the Situational Awareness Matters Show, episode 405. I'm your host, Rich Gasaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. Today's feature segment is sponsored by Gasaway Virtual Training. There are 33 online training programs there for you to choose from. Some of the programs are live events presented over Zoom, and some of them are pre-recorded events that you buy and watch. To learn more, visit the samatters.com website and click on the Virtual Training tab. Okay, let's jump into our feature segment and our interview with George Esbensen, president of the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, or MnFIRE, as we talk about the Hometown Heroes Assistance Program. During his 32 years in the fire service, George Esbensen served in many roles from firefighter to chief. Today, he volunteers as board president of the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, an advocacy nonprofit he co-founded in 2016, dedicated to providing Minnesota firefighters with the tools they need to prioritize and protect their health. Chief Esbensen has been an advocate for firefighter wellness for his entire career, leading efforts to ban cancer-causing flame retardants, establishing the Hometown Heroes Survivor Act, and in 2021, passed the most comprehensive firefighter well-being legislation in the nation, the Hometown Heroes Assistance Program. The summer of 2023 marked the 2-year anniversary of the Minnesota's legislature's passing the Hometown Heroes Act. This win for the state's fire service has since ensured that every Minnesota firefighter has access to the MnFIRE Assistance Program with expanded emotional trauma resources, including free visits to mental health professionals and ongoing peer support, and up to $20,000 of critical illness insurance policy that they're automatically enrolled in, and ongoing health and wellness training, all at no cost to them or their department. Firefighters from across the country and across Minnesota are affected by serious health concerns, including cardiac disease, emotional trauma, and cancer at rates nearly twice as high as the general public. But since the legislation went into effect, the Hometown Heroes Assistance Program, administered by the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, has changed thousands of lives, and an array of confidential resources are available to all active, volunteer, paid-on-call, part-time, and full-time Minnesota firefighters. In just over 2 years, the program has provided nearly 1,000 firefighter-focused mental health providers across the state of Minnesota to offer up to 5 no-cost counseling sessions per issue per year to firefighters and their families. To date, the Minnesota Firefighter Assistance Program has facilitated nearly 1,600 visits with mental health providers. An expanded network of trained MnFIRE peer supporters, which have responded to more than 675 calls for help. 149 paid critical illness claims totaling $1.9 million. Illnesses have included full benefit cancer, COVID-19, post-traumatic stress issues, skin cancer, and other cancers, ALS, heart attack, sudden cardiac arrest, heart disease, kidney failure, coronary artery disease, needing surgery, and more. 1,118 MnFIRE trainings to 17,524 firefighters about the increased occupational health risk they face and how to cultivate a healthy lifestyle.
Hey everyone, Rich Gasaway here, host of the Situational Awareness Matters show, and today I have with me George Esbensen. He's the president of the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, and we're going to get into talking about what that is and why this is so important, and why, if your state doesn't have something like the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, you might want to consider starting something that mirrors what we're doing in Minnesota. What George is leading the initiative in Minnesota. George, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Rich. Great to be here.
So let's just start with what it is and how it came to be.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So just like you, long history in the fire service. I started in 1986 and retired in 2018. And through that journey, it was probably only a few years in when it started to dawn on me and a couple others that we kept going to the same kinds of things away from the job, which were funerals and hospital visits. And it was always for the same three things: cancer issues, cardiac issues, emotional trauma issues. And so sort of filing that away in my brain along about 2016 through a bunch of other leadership roles I had within the state of Minnesota. Myself and Assistant Chief John Wolf and Fire Chief Mike Dobish decided to do something about it. And so we got a hold of the three big fire service organizations in Minnesota: the Professional Firefighters, the Chiefs Association, and the Volunteer Firefighters group called the MSFDA. And we decided to start kind of a third-party nonprofit that would address these issues. And we got some funding from them, and off we went. And the first thing we did was we started a peer support line. So we formed the organization in 2016, and we trained a bunch of peer supporters late in 2016. And 2017, we put out a toll-free number, and right away our phone began to ring with people that were suffering the consequences of being on the job. Emotional trauma stuff. And we realized very quickly that a lot of those people needed more than just peer support. They need trained mental health professionals. They needed referrals for cancer and referrals for cardiac, because in a lot of cases that was driving their mental health issues. And in Minnesota, of course, 90+% of the firefighters are some version of non-career versus the career organized labor firefighters. And so they didn't have any access to resources unless they worked for a large corporation, et cetera, et cetera. And even the career firefighters, a lot of the mental health resources that they had access to were not sort of trauma informed. They didn't really understand when firefighters are hurting that frequently it's from things that other people only see on TV or or have nightmares about. And so that sort of begat an effort in 2018 to pass something that we named the Hometown Heroes Assistance Program, which brings resources to firefighters and their families around the issues of cancer, cardiac, and emotional trauma. And now we're off and running. That legislative initiative passed on the last day of the last special session in 2021. And 90 days later, we were providing mental health resources, paying critical illness payments, and doing free training around the state of Minnesota.
Now, is the funding like a permanent source, George, or is it something that has to keep going back to the legislature for?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rich. So we're very fortunate that when the initial legislation passed in 2021, it was included in the base budget of the Department of Public Safety. So while every 2 years everyone's budget is up for renegotiation, the way our legislature works, being in the base budget is a more secure place, but you're always having to prove the worth of what you're doing, no different than House and Human Services or other branches of DPS, et cetera. And the money comes to MnFIRE as a grant, and it's $4 million per year to support Minnesota's 20,000 firefighters. So it's about $200 per firefighter per year to provide these incredible benefits to Minnesota's fire service.
And what are some of the ways that money is spent? I know, like, not every firefighter would require the need of the program. So how is the money distributed, and what kind of things is it spent on?
Sure. That's a great question. You're right. In some regards, not every firefighter is going to need all aspects of MnFIRE. But again, to kind of start, we offer free training around the topics that are impacting firefighters. So we have a general overview of why are cancer, cardiac, and emotional trauma so prevalent in the fire service, and what can you do about them, and what do those impacts look like? That's our overview. Then we have a deeper dives into cancer, a deep dive into cardiac issues, a deep dive into emotional trauma issues. And then recently we just added modules on sleep, one on nutrition and fitness, and then one on spouses and partner impacts, because firefighters typically have families. And as you know, Rich, from your long career in the fire service, I'm sure your family is very aware of the impacts of you being in the fire service has had on them, right? And so the training is something that every firefighter benefits from every year, for sure. The other pieces of the pie are funding the peer support operations. So that's volunteer peer supporters trained around the state of Minnesota who help firefighters in a peer support role. We have a provider network of mental health professionals around the state. There's over 900 now that we have identified and qualified as trauma-informed mental health providers. And our goal here with that network was to make it so that no matter where you live in Minnesota, you never have to drive more than an hour if you want to have an in-person mental health visit. And we know from our travels around the state that in greater Minnesota, a lot of times people have to drive an hour just to get decent groceries or see a movie, right? And so sort of having that 1 hour driving range is not unreasonable when you live in greater Minnesota. And then also the critical illness policy, which is focused on the issues of cancer and cardiac and emotional trauma. It's like an AFLAC policy. So if you get a diagnosis, let's say of cancer, you get a check for up to $20,000 to cover all those things that aren't covered by your healthcare program. So hotel stays, having to dine out, your family having to travel to help you out, someone to take care of your pets, your kids, special experimental drugs. And this isn't a reimbursement kind of benefit. It's a benefit where you get a check for up to $20,000 and you can use that however you see fit on your journey through your health or emotional health journey. So it's just like an AFLAC. It's the technical name for it is critical illness. And we provide that benefit, the critical illness benefit, and the mental health provider benefit by using third-party private sector companies that are already in those sectors. So MnFIRE hasn't rented fancy office space and hired a bunch of employees and has a bank of phones. We've farmed all that out to the private sector, who's already in the market and well positioned to provide fast, prompt, and courteous service. And that's why within 90 days after the legislation passed, June 30 of 2021, we were up and running in October, answering phones, providing mental health visits, providing critical illness payments to people that were diagnosed and sick, and then training statewide free. All that stuff's free.
And is this benefit extended to former firefighters and retired firefighters?
It is not currently, Rich, and that's a great question. And here's simply why. The simple answer is just a math equation. So to cover 20,000 firefighters, which is all the firefighters in Minnesota, is $4 million. If you were to add in all the retirees, that's probably another 20 or 30,000 at least. And so that's just exponentially more expensive. And when you think about this appropriation that was made from the general fund in Minnesota through this special legislative initiative, $4 million a year, it's the first time in more than 40 years that there's been funding specifically and only for the fire service out of general tax dollars. So it was a very heavy lift legislatively to even get this level of funding. And just to give you a little context, Minnesota ranks 21st in the nation in population. And according to the Minnesota Center for Fiscal Excellence, we invest 19th in the nation in law enforcement, 21st in the nation, so right on our ranking in public works, 22nd in parks, and 47th in the fire service. It would take $100 million a year to go from 47th, our 47th ranking, to 40th, and $800 million a year to get to 21st. So we are significantly underfunding our fire service in Minnesota. Probably part of it is because we have the high reliance on non-career firefighters. As you know, as the former Roseville fire chief, when you got there, it was mostly or all volunteer fire department led by a full-time career fire chief, right? And when you go to other states in the country, that's just not the way it is. For instance, I was just down in Texas earlier this week talking to the Texas state fire chiefs, and in Texas, they have 38,000 career firefighters and about 33 non-career firefighters. In Minnesota, we have 20,000 total firefighters. About 18,000 of them are non-career and only 2,000 are career. So you can see that the investment is significantly different. But there are other reasons too, which has to do with workers' comp and how we provide benefits. So this Hometown Heroes Assistance Program is a one-off and very unusual in Minnesota. And just for your listeners to know that MnFIRE is something I volunteer my time and energy for. I do stuff for MnFIRE on nights and weekends, or I take PTO from my regular job. This isn't my retirement gig. I don't get paid for it. And the fact that we use and we've leveraged the private sector to provide all these benefits, we have several part-time people, but we don't have a big staff and a big office. We operate really in the modern era with a very virtual presence in the marketplace.
Couple that with the fact that you personally cannot benefit from this initiative because you're a former retired fire chief. So as I asked, does it cover retired and former? And you said no. And I'm like, all right, well, you are passionately doing things for the benefit of firefighters, of which you will not be one of them, at least under the current design of the system.
Yeah, absolutely true. And Rich, because you and I are of the same generation, that the culture of the fire service when you and I came into it was horrifically bad around health and wellness, both physical and emotionally, those things that are related to your physical well-being and your emotional well-being. We didn't have EAP. When we went to a horrific call, we were told not to say anything to anybody about it. You certainly rarely, if ever, saw anyone show their emotions. And we had horrible fire department culture around clean gear, wearing our SCBA. I mean, for the first, I don't know, 10 years of my career, we rarely wore our SCBA on car fires. I mean, if we heard Chief One was on the way or one of our safety chiefs, we might put it on for their benefit, but we normally didn't, wear our breathing apparatus because we were too cool. And think about all those fires you went to, which a day or two later, you were still blowing soot out of your nose.
Yeah, right.
And our gear was never washed. Like, you just never washed your gear.
Right. Now, this training that you're offering, is this pre-recorded? Is it live virtual? Is it in person? What's the format for this?
Yeah, another great question. So first of all, it's in 2 to 2.5 hour blocks, which kind of mirrors the standard training, I'll say, night for the non-career firefighters in Minnesota, and even for the career firefighters when they get together for training. A couple hours is about all the seat time a firefighter can take. Currently, our training is delivered live by instructors, and they're mostly current or recently retired firefighters who we pay for their windshield time to get to and from wherever these locations are, and then for the class time. And we train them in our curriculum before they can become trainers for us. So we've really found that firefighters are not big fans of the virtual training world and having someone drone on to them, having a video of a PowerPoint presentation or something. Reminds me of when I went to college at the University of Minnesota with 300 students in the room, and the video professor showed a movie. So, it was like the ultimate.
Are you trying to hold these trainings like on what would be the department's regular drill nights, so you're getting better attendance, or is this like special sessions that are being advertised that people from that are being held regional, that people from multiple departments can come to, like one regional type program?
So great question. So fire departments sign up either online or by calling us for whatever night of the week they want, or whatever day of the week and whatever the time is. And then we show up, and it's typically to their regularly scheduled training night. So for a non-career fire department, that might be Wednesday night at 7:15 in Tower, Minnesota, right? And they just tell us that, and we take care of all the paperwork, the attendance, everything else. For a career department, let's say like Roseville, your old department, we would show up for A shift, B shift, and C shift. So, 3 days in a row, right? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever their schedule is, to hit all of them. Okay. And again, the people that deliver it are typically firefighters. Well, they're always firefighters. A lot of them are current. Some are recently retired. And part of our curriculum encourages the instructors to share their own journey through the fire service and why this training is important.
And how is it received? There's I don't know how to say it, but I think we both know what I'm trying to say, that there can be some
choose your words carefully, Rich.
Some stubbornness, some resistance, some denial of need. So how are you all overcoming that potential hurdle of the stigma of our old design, to maybe somehow change a culture? Are you doing it, or are you still pushing a really heavy rock up a steep hill with that?
Well, it's both, and it depends. I think it's, as the old saying goes, when there's been some research done on the Minnesota Fire Service, when you've seen one fire department in Minnesota, you've seen one fire department in Minnesota. And I would say that's true for the training, the reception of the training. So there's about 775 fire departments in Minnesota. About 590 some have participate in our training. So we still have about maybe 20% that haven't yet signed up for our training, but we're working on those. Some of it is people feel like they're too busy. Some, I believe you're right. It's cultural stuff. Maybe they're led by fire chiefs that are in your and my generation, and they think that all this stuff is a bunch of baloney because, I didn't need it when I came on. So what do these young whippersnappers need to know it, and then they go home and, abuse alcohol or drugs and are on their 9th marriage or whatever. And they're trying to figure out, I'm perfectly fine, right? So I think there's some of that resistance. We get really high marks for our training. We're a well-respected organization. Our instructors are well received. So it's really just us getting our foot in the door in some of those places. But that's always the challenge. There's no mandate currently in Minnesota to take our training, but we believe that over the course of time that we can change these firefighter well-being outcomes by changing the culture, making sure people are staying fit for the job, cleaning their gear, asking for help at the earliest signs of emotional or physical issues and not waiting and living in denial, et cetera, bringing their families in for the resources that we offer, et cetera. Because as you know, I think once firefighters get convinced of something, they get to really be evangelists for it. And my goal when people ask me about, how will you kind of measure how MnFIRE is, achieving success? Well, I think it's when we bring the rates of cancer, cardiac, and emotional trauma down to the level of the general public. That'll be one bar. And then the next bar will be when we get them below the rates of the general public. For instance, I saw a study once that said that firefighters are way more likely to have working smoke alarms in their house than the general public. Why? Because they've been indoctrinated and they've seen the benefits of those, and they've seen the horror shows of not having those. And I believe our training over time will do the same thing, but it's going to take a while. The fire service in Minnesota turns out over at about 5% a year. So we get about 1,000 new firefighters into the system every year, and 1,000, retire, leave the business. And so over 20 years, hopefully we'll have everybody who's taken some level of the MnFIRE training, and we'll at least have that perspective in their head, different than what you and I had.
Well, when you say to get the statistics down to the say the average of the population,
yeah,
do we even have the data for firefighters? I mean, that's always been one of the biggest challenges that we have in all respects for firefighters, is gathering accurate, timely data of that demographic, mostly because we do a poor job of self-reporting, things. Do we have a means to capture that data?
we do. There are some, I think, to your point, I think the idea about whether or not these things are real, that firefighters are more deeply impacted than the general public, I don't think those are really debatable anymore. So firefighters are about 10 to 14% more likely to get cancer than people in the general public. And the interesting thing is, you'll have a young person. There's a Chaska firefighter right now that's battling cancer. He's only 31 years old, which is very young for the type of cancer that he has. And it's also was moving at the speed of light. And that's very typical of firefighter cancers. They tend to get them at younger ages than the general population, whether it's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or multiple myeloma or glioblastoma. They tend to get them younger, and they also tend to have variants that are moving faster and more aggressively, than the general population. So that's the cancer story. The cardiac story is also in that kind of 15 to 20% more likely to get it, and a slightly higher percent for more likely to die from it, because firefighters are tough. And so, if you got chest pain and whatever, the way you solve that, right, is go out for a longer run or play, go lift weights or whatever, right? Because you're in denial because you're a firefighter. So, and most firefighters in our country are men. And I think we know, Rich, maybe this doesn't apply to you and I, but men tend to be a lot less self-aware than women. So self-awareness is not our friend. The lack of self-awareness does not help us. And then for emotional trauma, national studies, and we also verified this with a study that we did in conjunction, MnFIRE did with the University of Minnesota, is that about 47% of firefighters have or are having suicidal ideation. So if you and I and one other person are all sitting together, if it's not me, it's one of you two that has or is having it, if we're active firefighters. And it kind of lines up, right? Because firefighters are just like everyone else. They didn't come out of the womb with some special genetic coding to wipe away all the stuff that they see and do. But they have all the same challenges that the general population does: relationship stresses, kids, finances, career, parents, siblings, and then pile onto that the fact that either as your way to give back to the community as a volunteer or your career, you're mindfully going to other people's worst days over and over and over again. And then there's a culture that says, hey, Rich, shake it off, man. This is the job. You don't need help. You're a firefighter, right? So,
and do you have difficulty getting firefighters who kind of have that mindset? How do you get them to break from that and actually, step up for the help that you guys have available to them?
well, that is the challenge, because we have a culture that previously hasn't really engendered that kind of behavior, but it is getting better. We've had a lot of stories on the news, a lot of news articles throughout Minnesota. I think it was something like 200 million media impressions last year. So we spend a lot of time telling stories for those people that are willing to share. I had a fire chief come up to me after a county chiefs meeting, a fire chief that I've known for decades, and tell me, hey, I just want to say thank you for the resources that MnFIRE is providing. And I'm like, no problem, chief. We're happy to do it. And I hope your firefighters, on the mend is on the road to recovery. And he said, well, it wasn't one of my firefighters, it was me. And this person is right out of central casting, mountain big, hands the size of pie plates, big, tough person. And he said, I didn't think I was ever going to be able to smile again. And then one night at 11 o'clock at night, I decided to call your toll-free number because I was going to a dark place. And he said, and since then, my life has changed, and it saved my marriage, and it saved me. And, it's just, it's an awakening, and he's, his life has been forever changed. Another person that I know quite well, not through my MnFIRE experience, but others, is in a very serious and frightening cancer battle, and got a check for $20,000 from our critical illness policy, and it took him 7 days from the time he filled out the paperwork to get the check deposited into his account. And it just happened to be able to pay for the $19,000 of special experimental medication for his type of cancer that his insurance company, his healthcare company, had declined. And this was life-saving dollars for him and his family to, continue his cancer fight. So these are the real stories. And I think if you have time to connect with fire chiefs and other fire service leaders, there's very few among us who haven't seen this firsthand within the firefighters that we're honored to lead and to protect, or our own personal friends.
And are there other states doing things like this, George, or are we here in Minnesota like the trailblazer in this?
We are the trailblazer, Rich. Other states have pieces and parts. Some have the cancer benefit, but in order to get it, you have to sign off and waive all future claims to workers' comp. So that's not a good deal for anybody. Some people have some of the mental health resources, but generally they cost money. and they're not as readily available, and they don't include family members. So one of the unique things about our mental health resource is that it's 5 visits per firefighter per incident per year, and anyone in their immediate family, including kids that might be away at college. But if your Uncle Frank lives in your house and you're an active firefighter and you're suffering, Uncle Frank can get the visits as well. All free. All free, because it's a family dynamic when firefighters are suffering and hurting.
Do you ever get the opportunity, George, for people in other states that are desiring to have something like this to reach out to you and say, "Hey, how'd you guys do what you're doing there?"
Yeah, well, we just did that for the first time in the state of Texas. I just came back from there actually last night in San Antonio for the Texas State Fire Chiefs winter workshop. And let me tell you, their idea of winter is a lot different than yours and mine, because it was in the 60s and 70s there. So, but I guess that's
complaining about how cold it was.
Right, exactly. Everyone's got stocking caps on, and they're freezing to death, turn their car heaters on, etc. No, great group of people. But yes, they specifically had myself down there, and then Aon, who's the world's largest insurance consultancy, who did all this work free for us in terms of evaluating and helping us design our program. They'll do that for any state or any other large group in the nation. And so they came down there, and yeah, we put on a 1-hour meeting for the board of directors, and then about a 2-hour presentation to the General Assembly of a couple hundred chief ones throughout Texas, to talk to them about how they might do this in Texas.
Oh, I hopefully Texas and other states pick up and are able to run with it. What would you want us to know about the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative or the Hometown Heroes Assistance? What should we know about it that we don't know about it yet? Because I didn't ask you the right question yet.
Well, I think the thing to know is that, yeah, you can do it in your state too, or even maybe even not passing legislation, maybe just taking a large conglomerate of fire departments that all are like-minded. And for $200 a firefighter, if your group is large enough, if it's in the thousands, so maybe you gather up several counties worth of firefighters and get this coverage, that for $200 per year per firefighter, you can bring this to your firefighters also. But you can also, pass legislation as we did in Minnesota. I mean, in 2021, just to kind of take you back a couple of years, that's when we had a governor who was a Democrat, a House that was marginally controlled by the Democrats, and a Senate that was marginally controlled by the Republicans, and they couldn't agree on what color the sky was most days. But they did manage to get behind this, because this is a bipartisan kind of initiative helping the people that we count on to help us in our worst moments, and the people that, are true givers. And the fire service has a really great brand and is very trusted. And so it resonates with people. But you need to have a legislative champion, and you need to do your homework, and you need to be not afraid to ask for funding, even in a state like Minnesota, which previously, has significantly underfunded the fire service in terms of how it invests in the fire service.
So, did you ask for $4 million and got your ask, or did you ask for more and got less?
We asked for a bigger number, knowing that we would be asked to reduce that just through the process. But we got what we needed to do. The bigger number would have provided, instead of a $20,000 critical illness benefit, it would have been a $30,000 benefit. And instead of 5 visits, really the number probably has got to be 8 or 10. But we've done some private fundraising and kind of created a scholarship program, if you will, for people that need more. Also, that critical illness program that I talked about does have a PTSD component. So if your mental health provider diagnoses you with PTSD, you get up to $5,000, and at $120 a visit, that's about 40 more visits for you. So there's a pretty solid base of coverage available through our program. Yeah.
If someone wanted to help the initiative financially or some other form of support other than financial, how can people support the mission?
They can go to our website, MnFIREinitiative.com, and it says, do you want to help, or something to that effect. And so there's different ways you can be an instructor. You can help us at our fundraisers, because while the state drives $4 million a year into MnFIRE, we raise other funds on our own to do things like advocacy with the legislature, paying for those visits that extend beyond 5. We're working right now on developing funding for a healthcare navigator. So let's say, Rich, that you're an active firefighter and you get the dreaded cancer diagnosis. Well, one of the challenges sometimes that firefighters run into, especially if they're in smaller areas, is maybe that small hospital wants to try to do all the treatment at that small hospital when maybe that's really not in your best interest. So if you get a cancer diagnosis, you'd be able to call MnFIRE. You'd be able to tap into a person that would help you navigate the healthcare system based on your healthcare coverage, where you live, who you work for, et cetera, and what kind of cancer you've been diagnosed with, and find the best place to go get treatment so you have the best possible chance at a really positive outcome. Because unfortunately, sometimes people don't have the wherewithal to explore all the options. They don't have the expertise. Maybe the healthcare system doesn't either, and they sometimes get steered maybe down a path that isn't optimal for them. And so having that healthcare navigator will be another really important kind of thing to add to the equation.
And if somebody wanted to follow along with what you are doing, other than the website, is there are you on any form of social media, or what marketing? Is there a newsletter? How can somebody follow along with it or be connected with the message?
Yeah, all of the above. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, for sure, and X, aka Twitter. We also have a newsletter that comes out periodically, monthly, which has then links to success stories, links to research, links to what is going on around the country, links to stories that we've been featured in, those kinds of things. So it really keeps people up to date.
Okay. And they can get connected with all that. Is there links to all of that through the website?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
The website is very current. We invest quite heavily in our website, and keeping it, as you know, keeping websites current is a curse.
It's a challenge.
It is. It is.
Is there anything else, George, that you'd want to share before we wrap the show up?
Well, I would just say that Minnesota is leading the way. We certainly don't have all the answers. And if people have other things that they're doing in their states that we think we could benefit from hearing about, we certainly are always looking to take that next leap forward, all with the fundamental mission of taking care of firefighters and their families. That's what it's always been for me, Rich, in my career. And I know it has been in yours too. The first time we really got to know each other was when you were doing your research on the situational awareness stuff. And I think I was one of your early interviewees when we talked about how we command, which to me is, fire scene safety, and MnFIRE is safety away from the fire scene, right? But they're both important, and people should have, I would say, situational awareness about their own personal physical and mental well-being and that of their families. I mean, that gets to the core of sort of that fundamental principle. There used to be an old cavalry saying that said your order of priority is first your horse, then your saddle, then yourself. And to me, that's what taking care of firefighters is all about. Taking care of the people doing the work, taking care of their families, and the rest of it will take care of itself.
Yeah, you made a strong essay argument there, George. It really is, even though my focus is mostly essay for emergency scenes, there's definitely a strong need for situational awareness of self and family, and the sphere of those closest to us, and how what we do not only impacts us but also impacts them. And
Yeah.
so I want to thank you for what MnFIRE Initiative is doing, your contribution to it, your efforts to get the legislation passed, which I, along the way in my fire chiefing journey, had the opportunity to be part of a few initiatives to try to get some legislation passed, and I can attest to you might enjoy the sausage, but you don't want to watch it being made. And the legislative process is the sausage being made, and it takes a lot of tenacity to see an initiative like this through all the way to the signing of the bill. I probably heard you let off a war whoop all the way from Eden Prairie to Roseville when that passed, because I can only imagine how exciting it was to finally get it to all the way across the finish line. And thank you for that effort. Thank you to everyone that's connected with the MnFIRE Initiative, the instructors, the health professionals that are involved in it. I think it's just a wonderful victory for Minnesota, and I'm so proud of it. And I can't wait to put this episode live and to share it out with the world.
Well, I really appreciate it, Rich. And, I think it's serendipitous that you and I met those many years ago and connected on the situational awareness stuff, because, I was very focused on fireground safety and expertise, and didn't want to be one of those people that had an after action report written about, the horror show on their particular fireground. And this is just another turn of the wheel of that same thing, right? It's all about that, and taking care of the people that take care of us. And yeah, huge team, right? I mean, I'm president of MnFIRE only because I missed a meeting and they had a vote without me there. So it's just what happens. And yeah, the legislative process can be frustrating, but I think it's really actually built that way for a reason, so that things aren't just passed willy-nilly. So I can appreciate and welcome the journey to refine our mission and how we go about doing it. And so it's all just been a great honor, and I really appreciate the time you're giving us here today. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you to George Esbensen, president of the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, for sharing your passion about the initiative and the Hometown Heroes Assistance Program. If you've been following a while on social media, or even listen to some of the most recent podcast episodes, you know that I took 6 months off from teaching events on the road. I had done 90 to 120 programs a year for 14 years, so I just needed a rest. Sharpen the saw, as Stephen Covey would say. So I just took some time off to recharge the batteries and sharpen the saw, and spend some time at home and remodel my kitchen and spend some time with my family. And that time off, though, helped me to remind me how passionate I am about the topic of situational awareness. And it also provided some opportunities for our certified master instructors to step up and train some programs on their own, which they did. And if you're interested in where we're going to be upcoming, here's what's on the agenda. When this episode airs, certified master instructor Drew Moldenhauer will be at the Suncor Edmonton refinery in Edmonton, Alberta. Suncor is the parent company to Syncrude, which we've done training for over the past 7 years. And since Syncrude had experienced what they describe as a fundamental change in their organizational culture as a result of that training, we were excited that the situational awareness program is now being rolled out to their other refineries. And this will be our third visit to Suncor Edmonton and providing training to their process operators. On February 10, I will be in Calgary, Alberta, delivering a program for the Canada Task Force 2 group. This is my first time presenting to Canada Task Force 2, so I'm really looking forward to that program. February 29th, I will be in Orlando, Florida, delivering a program for the Center for Public Safety Excellence Conference. And this is the 8th time the CPSE Excellence Conference has invited me to be part of their schedule. So I really appreciate your faith and confidence there. March 1 and 2, I will be at the Spotsylvania Volunteer Fire Department in Spotsylvania, Virginia. And this will be my second program for Spotsylvania Volunteer Fire Department. The first one was virtual during the pandemic. So this will be my first opportunity to be with them live in Virginia. So I'm looking forward to that. March 4 and 5, I will be at the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute's National Fire Service Staff and Command Program in Annapolis, Maryland. This is my 22nd year presenting for MnFIRE's National Fire Service Staff and Command Program. So thank you so much to the director and to all the MnFIRE staff for this wonderful and long-lasting relationship that we've had over 22 years. April 19 and 20, I'll be at the Taos County Fire Department in Red River, New Mexico, and I'm especially excited for this one because New Mexico is the only state that I haven't presented a situational awareness program in. So in April, that changes, and I will click off the last of all 50 states that have hosted a situational awareness program. And our master instructors are delivering programs as well, and collectively they delivered more than 30 programs in the last quarter of 2023, and they've got programs already on the books too for 2024. You can see a list of all of our upcoming programs at the samatters.com website. I also want to just take a moment, as I do in every episode, to thank some hosts of recent programs or consultations. November 27 to December 1, Certified Master Instructor Drew Moldenauer and I were at the Suncor Edmonton Refinery in Edmonton, Alberta, delivering 5 days of training for their process operators on situational awareness and high-risk decision-making during periods of high vulnerability, those times when they're most at risk of getting hurt and killed. On December 9th, I delivered a full-day program for the Maryland Fire Chiefs Association in Ocean City, Maryland. This is my fourth time that I deliver programs for the Maryland Fire Chiefs Association, so thank the Maryland Chiefs for that opportunity. It was a great day, super turnout. You know, not very often can I say we filled the room, but we filled the room. And for that, I'm very, very thankful. If you know of any local, county, regional, state, or national organization that might be interested in hosting a live event or even a virtual event, please refer them to our website, samatters.com, and they can click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage, and I'll give them a call. Finally, remember to check the show notes for how to subscribe to our newsletter and how to follow us on social media. There, we're sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters Show with Dr. Richard Gasaway. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit his website, samatters.com. If you're interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for a program, or if you would like to be a guest on his show, click the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage.
Well, that's it. Episode 405 of the Situational Awareness Matters Show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, George Esbensen, president of the Minnesota Firefighter Initiative, talking about the Hometown Heroes Assistance Program. Thank you to our viewers and listeners for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.